Hello, I'm Dr. Lynette Sim, and welcome to Pop Talk, the show where you never know what subjects might pop up. Have you figured out the meaning of life? Your purpose? Do you know what that is? Then stay tuned for today's show. We're going to be speaking with an expert to find out what your purpose is, and maybe you might be able to find out what yours is by the end of the show. Lisa, will you introduce our guest?
Well, thank you, Dr. Lynette, and we also want to introduce our co-host for today. Of course, she's always here, Rosemary LeGrand, and looking beautiful as usual. Thank you, Rosemary, for being here. Well, I just am so excited to welcome our guest. Her name is Beth Townsend. She's the award-winning author of the book Life on Purpose and a contributor to two others. She's also an award-winning television and podcast host as well. Life on Purpose TV is seen in over 120 countries and reaches 133 million homes. A lot of people know about Beth. The show has won 23 awards in 2020 and 2021, and that is absolutely amazing. She's also a speaker, she's a certified purpose coach, and a former real estate executive, and she is from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That means she traveled all the way here to Texas to be on our program, so we're so grateful you did that, and your husband Fred came along with you, and we love seeing him as well. And you are just an extremely hard worker. I mean, all of this tells us that you work hard, but you've been working hard for a long time, haven't you, Beth? By your resume, you had to enter the workforce very early. Can you share about what happened right after you graduated from high school?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. So when the youngest of 5 kids rises up, by the time you get to that point, it's time to get ready to sink or swim. So my dad was on to his 9th wife. Yes, I know, it doesn't sound believable, but he was. And my mom's marriage to my current stepfather had failed. So at this point, they went broke. So my mom, the stepfather went one way, and my mom ended up with nothing. And it was the time that I was graduating high school. So she decided to move and start over. And I had been accepted into the University of Southern Mississippi. So I decided, okay, I'd literally graduated high school at 17. What am I going to do? And that's when it all kind of began, because you have plans to become an adult, but it was a radical moment where literally rent, being able to buy food, the whole thing, it was just a quick adjustment to becoming an adult, and it was so hard. But yeah, it started very early.
Wow. Beth, even though you were moving up the corporate ladder, did you know what your purpose was at this time?
Well, purpose is very much a process. There are seasons in my life when my purpose was just to keep a roof over my head. And as a faith journey, I was saved in middle school, but I didn't know what walking with Christ was. And because I was good at my job, because I had to be good at my job, I didn't have the letters behind my last name like a lot of people did. I didn't have the degree and the experience like a lot of people had. So I decided early in to pick my purpose in skills at work. And very soon into that, I decided a great attitude and a work ethic would be my skills to success. So my mom had demonstrated that. She was a single mom to all of us kids. She was able to work 2 jobs when needed. So we learned a work ethic very early on. So I never knew that work was anything other than you gave it all you got. That's kind of the way it was.
And tell us about what you were doing at that time.
Well, when I first graduated, and I went to University of Southern Mississippi, I had thought somebody was going to pay my bill. That's a whole nother story. But they quietly came and told me I would need to make other plans. So I moved to Virginia, and I got into property management because they had an apartment and a salary. And my mom and my sister were there. I had spent a couple of years in Mississippi trying and falling flat on my face numerous times. And so I went to Virginia. I got into the field of property management, then went to Atlanta. Then I worked my way up till I was the executive vice president above the owner, because I'm telling you, the work ethic and the great attitude and just the love that I had for my job, because when you have to have a job and you don't have a plan B, you got no fallback plan, then work works for you, and work really was a great place for me. So I became a trainer in my industry. So that's kind of how the purpose thing started. I basically was a cheerleader for what I did.
I love how scripture in Proverbs 19:21 says, many are the plans in the man's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. I always like to say it, if you want to hear God laugh, just tell him your plans. So how did you go about finding your purpose in your life, and can you define for us what you mean by purpose?
I can. Purpose, by way of Webster's, is the thing that you're created for. So purpose is knowing by faith that we are created for this time in our life, for a specific purpose. Not only that, but we're gifted for that. So, you know, we are created by God for a purpose for right now. So, but how that came about is when I started teaching seminars, I was very much younger than most of the people that I was teaching in the seminars, but people started asking me about purpose because I looked like I knew my purpose. So I would get up and talk about, you know, how to do the job and things like that, and people would ask me, they say, how did you know your purpose? I didn't know what purpose was. But over time, that question each time began to sink a little deeper, and finally I realized this is very much a God question. And so I decided if I struggled with it, I knew other people did too. So in 2001, that's when I started interviewing other people.
Yeah, so your purpose can change.
It does.
You might, you know, I was a sportscaster for 19 years, and so, but my purpose changed. God pulled me into ministry.
Yeah.
And so, but I love doing this. I love doing a Christian television show rather than maybe a sports show. I love sports, but this is a lot more fun. So as you said, in 2001, you began interviewing people for your magazine, and it was about living life on purpose. And now you're doing the same thing on television as well. Can you share just from a few of the interviews, we got plenty of time, some of those interviews that you've conducted? For example, I know you interviewed, I saw this on your website, Dr. George Barna, who, if you all remember, George Barna owns a research company. He's the one that, Barna Research says that 1 in 4 people, I mean, he's like an expert on all sorts of research projects. So feel free to share about some of the public figures that you've interviewed and just really tell us how they found their purpose.
Okay, and let me backtrack just a bit to what you said, because purpose is a process. But the process, it does change, but what's happening is we're becoming Christ-like. So it depends on how soon you surrender to that process. So when God called me to write a book, you know, it took 20 years to write the book, but I thought I was ready. But that was the moment when God really went to work in my soul. So while purpose may change over time, the goal is that we become Christ-like, we learn to love others like Christ loved, and we learn to accept others like Christ accepted others. So that's what takes so long. It's, you know, surrender now, because you can make it a lot easier. But as far as interviewing people like Dr. George Barna, most of the people that I've interviewed, and him specifically, I think when it comes to what should we do with our life, people want to ask people. And what we should do is ask God. You know, one of my favorite interviews in the book was with a lady who had a vision for her life. And she had a vision of a homeless shelter in Atlanta for women and children. And I'll spare you the details, but the bottom line is she advanced from one building to the next building to the next building, and there was a group of young moms and we were going to see this building that they were buying, and we were so excited because it sounded like the Ritz-Carlton of homeless shelters. So we get to this building, we're all in a bus, I mean, a bunch of us moms with this lady, and she was telling us what this building was going to be like, and we're like, oh my gosh, how did she get such a building? Where did she get the money? You know, we're going through the questions, and we drive up, and we're like, wait, what? You know, it's kind of like that moment where, okay, so we think, okay, it must be inside because it's not outside. So we're listening to her, going through all of her description, very descriptive descriptions, and we're thinking it must be inside. So we go inside, worse than outside. And it just to say the building was in disarray, it stunk, it needed to be redone. But as we're walking through and she is going through, this is going to be the daycare, this is going to be the sick room, I realized in that moment, she didn't see what we saw. She saw what God had given her to see. She had the vision. Wow. She could see what God was calling her to. Now the rest of us, we would have said, Ruth, honey, It's not going to happen. We're godly women, right? We would have tried to help her. But that's what happens is we think, and Dr. Barna was one of those great examples. And so many people have said this, just ask God. If you're struggling with what your purpose is, He's the only one who created you for it. He's the only one who gifted you to be it and to walk in fullness of the power of His Holy Spirit. So we turn down the voice of other people and we ask God until we know that He has said to us. Because it could be that people in our life mean well for us and they say, don't start a TV show. Don't start a whole book company where you recognize people. Don't start a book tour to go across America. Most people would tell us, you're crazy, don't do that. But if God says do it, we better be listening. And His voice ought to be loud.
And the bad thing is when God does tell you to do it and you resist, right? Yeah. I mean, because He'll find ways to make you do it after a few turn downs. I've done that a million times. Yeah. Like, no, I don't think so.
Right. Right.
Do you know, Beth, you have 10 purpose principles. And for those watching right now that don't even know which direction to go, can you share a few of those?
Yes. Well, everything that I did in the book, I've tried to come up with, as a coach, I've come up with a process. So there are 3 pillars of purpose, and those are the people in your life, because we think if we've got a lot of people that's good, but we've got to be very strategic. Our people have to be on purpose. We have to have a provision plan, because we all think if God's called us to it, then God's going to have a financial plan. And this is where, as an interviewer over time, I've seen a lot of ministries fail because they didn't have a proper plan for their money in place. And that's a very key part of your purpose plan. And then your physical body. It's everybody does what they've got to do. But if you really want to live your life on purpose, you've got to be doing all you can to retain energy so that you can do all the things that God's called you to do, because it's going to take a lot of energy. So those are the pillars, I think, the whole foundation. But as far as purpose principles, when I interviewed the people over time, and I picked some out of my book that completely changed my life. And the purpose principles are things like a vision, knowing you have a vision for your life, faith over fear. One of my favorites and one of the most popular topics as a coach is knowing your nots. See, everybody wants to know what to do and where to go. But I believe if you start with who you're not and where you shouldn't be.
I'm not a brain surgeon.
And what you're never going to be. See, we've got the social media thing all wrong. We can watch people and say, oh, this is great. I'm so glad they're doing that. That's a not for me. We literally have to voice and say, this is a not for me. I mean, I'm a speaker. I love to go out and speak, but I'm never going to be a Bible teacher. I'm never going to be a you. So I can say, great for Lisa, but I don't have to go out there and feel inadequate because I'm not a Bible teacher. I'm a storyteller. And so the purpose principles are based on, when you get in your car and you go on a trip, you have a road map. Or if you build a house, per se, you have a blueprint. For our lives, we have very few plans in place that help guide us. And I like to say, if it's not on purpose, is it an accident? Have we all had a few accidents?
Huh. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
I'm just thinking about all the things I'm not right now. I'm not a snowboarder.
Yeah.
I loved how you covered the 3 pillars of purpose, but one of them that you touched on was that physical being.
Yeah.
I know currently I'm in the midst of I just moved twice in a month. My daughters are graduating. We have surgeries. My husband broke his hand. Yeah. So what is it about the physical part that you share?
I share taking care of your body as a temple, which also includes rest and listening to your body. So in other words, I fell and broke ribs not long ago. So for several weeks I had to, and I'm a workout crazy person because that's part of my mental health strategy. I believe in a very strong mental health strategy. And to reduce stress in my life, which we all have, that's one of the things that I do to help. So, but there are seasons in my life where I've been hurt and I haven't been able to work out. Mm-hmm. So I've had to say, okay, Lord, you've called me for this season to rest. And I've tried to take that as a learned behavior because, I'm energetic. God gave me a lot of energy, and I'm very thankful for that. But as you get older, you have to be very careful with your body and not overdo things, but also not underdo things. I can't do now what I used to could do. But I can adjust that and come up with, more walking, less running. Just that type of thing. So I think you have, in order to get where you're going, you have to start with where you are. So you make goals. Again, it goes back to having a plan. All right, what are my goals? When I fell and broke my ribs, my first goal was just to walk a mile. And it might have taken an hour, but my doctor said, get up and move. So I'm like, okay, this hurts, but I'm gonna walk a mile. And I'm gonna go very slow, but that was part of my strategy to get healthier quicker. So I just think that our bodies are miraculous, but I think we also have to take very good care of it so we retain that energy and that positive mindset. We have to know, I like to say, what's your personal therapies? What are the things that reduce stress for you? And everybody needs to know what those are.
I love that. You're singing to the choir, because over Easter I badly sprained my ankle. I thought it was broken. I mean, the whole thing was twice the size of the other, black and blue. And then I was on at a speaking event, and I strained my back picking up a box of books, and then I got a cold. I mean, it was like, I like to work out.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, maybe Lord, you're telling me that I need to slow down a little bit and rest. And it's hard for us who like to work out, who like to do, extracurricular things. I love to walk. I love to work out on the elliptical. So that's a good point. We have to take care of our bodies, and maybe if we cannot do the exercise, then we have to rest. I mean, maybe that's what God is telling us to do. So you're speaking to me. Thank you very much. And I know that I need to rest more probably. And we talked about that shift in purpose that can possibly happen. I've been recently brought back to my Jewish roots, and it was supernatural. And now, it's been a progression, and now I'm working on a Doctor of Ministry in Messianic Jewish Studies, but I still don't know what this is all about. And I know I'm supposed to be there because God's given me favor, and I know it's all going well. I'm using the material for other things, that we do, but I still don't know what this is leading to. And sometimes I think it takes a while to, maybe God has you taking that leap of faith, right? To walk into this, that He's calling you, but maybe what doesn't really define the purpose. Is that something that can happen?
Yes, well, I bank on a few scriptures, and one of those, seek and you will find, ask and will be given. What's the other one? Seek and you will find, ask and knock and the door will be open. So if we seek God first, and we truly seek Him first, with our hearts, with our time, with all that, then you can't miss your purpose. I like to say that, because I'm energetic and I'm always going after things, I like to feel like I'm a quarterback. I'm throwing a lot of things out all day, every day. But if God closes the door, I am, yes, sir.
Right.
But if God opens the door, I'm running through it. But, it's kind of like the book idea. When God called me to write a book, I'm thinking it's going to be a bestseller the next week, right? Well, it was 20 years before God shaped my heart in such a way that my message was right. And I still can remember the day that I got it, why He didn't want me to write the book back then. It was the wrong story. I wanted to honor, my family I come from a great family that had great difficulty. And I didn't want to dishonor anyone. And so I had to wait until I had learned enough from the people that I'd interviewed. I had learned enough from learning the Word and trusting in the Holy Spirit that once I made the shift in the attitude I began to see it from the proper perspective, a positive place. Because for a long time it was all negative. Some of the things that I went through, then that was when finally God said, okay, now you're ready. But I was a completely different person in those 20 years.
Beth, you are a woman of faith. How does faith play into us trying to find our purpose?
Well, faith, purpose is a mindset. If you go back to the drawing board every day and you wake up and say, okay, God made me for a purpose. Not only that, I'm outlandishly gifted to live that purpose, and I'm seeking Him. Our communication with God is ongoing. Then it becomes more of a expectation. I have made a bunch of mistakes in my life. I have hit a bunch of brick walls. I have made a lot of errors in thinking that I'm going, but God has always been able to redeem those. And so it is a question of faith. I have also been on my knees before the Lord in complete tears going, Lord, didn't you call me to this? I mean, what is happening? Because, you go seasons, years, weeks with nothing on the horizon, and you think, okay, do I need to go do something else? Was I wrong, Lord? I mean, there have been 2 or 3 times in my life where I've just been shattered. I'm like, Lord, was I wrong about this? And yes, I think part of what happens with us in our faith walk is we learn to be authentic with our true stories. And God is molding all those past hurts. And I like to say the past is present until it's resolved. God wants to take everything we've been through to show us what we're going to and who's the one that's got us through. And it's for His purposes. Our story is for His glory. So I think we have to have those. It's like when you feel the worst about where you're headed, that's when you're just on your knees before the Lord. And that is faith, because you're worn out with trying to do things, and then God has to come in and moves and keep you going.
Awesome.
Yeah, I remember feeling, being in that season myself, because I'd gotten my doctorate degree, and yet I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't teaching anymore. I wasn't in ministry at the time. And I said, okay, God, so you made me doctor of laundry?
Yeah.
I mean, really? That's all I seem to have been doing with 2 girls and my husband. And then each year I'd be like, okay, what's my purpose? Because it can't be just laundry. There's got to be something more. But when He did bring my purpose, it was mentoring.
Yeah.
And so I'm a life mentor to many women now, and young couples, and we discuss a variety of topics, past hurts, wounds, current issues, life, future, school, etc. And so, and you do a lot of coaching yourself, to other people. I wanted to ask you, when you are coaching people, what are some of the things that you drive them to discuss in your sessions so that they can come to find their purpose?
Oh, such a loaded question. Yes. The thing that I help people the most with is I ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you when it comes to being a great communicator? And where would you like to be? Because most people don't talk about what most people need to talk about. So therefore, the breakdown in almost all relationships, marriages, oftentimes relationships with kids, it is broken down over either lack of communication or miscommunication. So over the years, as I've interviewed different people, they're all skilled communicators. They listen, they ask questions, they process the information, and that is where, with most people I go, is to help them communicate. I'll say, what if you have, 10 relationships? Let's pick 2 you're going to really become great at conversation with, because few people commit to becoming great communicators.
Yeah.
And so that's where I go with people, because if you can have authenticity in relationship with people, and you can talk about, I like to say, let's put some stuff on the table and get some Clorox and, get some germs, because you can't go through life without having to have some real hard conversations with people, and, dealing with our pasts and dealing with things that we've been through, and things that, we've created ourselves, and we have to be able to talk about that. In Revelation 12:2, it says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. So the blood of the Lamb, Jesus has done His part. He's done all of His part, and He's done it in us. So we now have to share our stories. We have to be out there with the vulnerability and communicating the message of what we've been through. And that's another thing, is helping people unseal secrets.
Yeah.
Because if you're living with some darkness and there's things, that you've never told anybody, you've got to tell somebody, because that's got to be exposed to the light. And there's a lot of misplaced emotions with people that, don't deal with what they need to deal with, and then what God wants for us is freedom. So He's not, the first Christian retreat I ever went to, I thought I was going to have to stand up and list all my sins. Well, it wasn't that. They wanted me to unburden myself from all my sins, and that was just overwhelming. It's like, you got to be kidding me, you know?
Yeah.
Very important to share your testimony. All of us are trained speakers, and we all share our testimonies. And sometimes our purpose is birthed in pain. I found this great verse. Psalm 57:2 says, I cry out to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. So sometimes our purpose starts with a cry.
Yeah.
Starts with a cry out, Lord, help me. You know, what is going on here? And a lot of times that purpose is birthed in pain. Rosemary, fatherless. Lynette, sexual abuse. Myself, fatherless with a mentally ill mom. And so a ministry was birthed out of that. And for all of us, things are happening because of this painful start. So can you talk about how a pain can define a purpose, or how many times God uses that pain for our purpose?
Yes. One of the things, I too lived with, you know, my father was kind of in and out of my life. We had a lot of step families, so there was a lot of confusion. And as a result of that, when I was old enough to date, I began dating older men. And that just, when you're fatherless, and someone, you look to fill that need anywhere. If it's a man, if it's whatever, you just are so hungry. And I write about this process in my book, because one of the interviews that I did was with Bill McCartney that started Promise Keepers. Because I thought, okay, all those men kneeling down in all those stadiums, I don't believe that's real. I'm going to go talk to the man who is saying this can be real for men to labor themselves out on the floor for their wives and to become better husbands. And that was a wound that was healed in me. And as a result of that, I ended up pregnant. I had an abortion. I had never told my husband. And that pain, I had no idea how much that was keeping me down in shame, because secrets seal shame in. And once I began to share that, and I wrote about it in my book, and now women call me from across the country. They've never told anybody about an abortion they had, sometimes 50 years ago. And they call me and they're like, I just want to tell you, I've never told this to anybody. But I know that once they get off the phone with me, I'm just the beginning. God just opened up the door to freedom, and he's getting ready to do a work. So that pain, that incredible pain for me, is a big part of purpose, because I show people you don't need to live in shame. God's got freedom for us.
And when we let that story out, there is healing. I mean, I know we've all experienced it. I think every time I say it, there's a little bit more healing from the pain from the past. Well, thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you.
For being here on Pop Talk. I think you've helped a lot of people to find their purpose. If you want to reach out to Beth Townsend, you can find her at her website, bethtownsend.com. This is her book, Life on Purpose. You're going to want to get it. And you can find out more about her TV show also on our website, the award-winning TV show. We're so glad to have you on Pop Talk.
Thank you. It's great to be with all of you.
And of course, we would love for you to reach us here at Pearls of Promise Ministries. You can do that by emailing us at info@pearlsofpromiseministries.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at Pop Talk Media, and Instagram at pop_ministries. All of our past Pop Talk shows can be found on our YouTube channel as well. And of course, we have an amazing opportunity for you to connect with us at our annual Level Up Conference. It's coming this year, October 8th in Lewisville, Texas. It's just north of Dallas. Tickets are available on sale at eventbrite.com.
And thanks to all of our television programs as we reach the world with topics that changes lives. Some of the places that you could find us is Life Network for Women, Overcomers TV, Covenant Daughters Network, CTN Tallahassee, the Bloom Network, and World Trumpet TV.
And I want to thank our production company, Grace Point Media, for all of your media needs. You can go to gracepoint.media. That is Pop Talk for today. We're just ordinary girls
Who God's turning into pearls.
Have a wonderful week.